You are listening to Up From The Ground, a podcast by Assam.Stories. I'm your host Sukanya, bringing to you stories that you might have probably heard but deserves to be retold. In today's episode, we talk about the Assamese language agitation of the 1830s to 80s and how it was instrumental in shaping the Assamese language that we read, write and speak today. Thank you for tuning in. Happy listening. The Assamese language agitation of the 1830s to 80s and the official language movement of the 1950s and 60s are often referred to as the dark ages of the Assamese language. With the British annexation of Assam in 1826 and its subsequent annexation with the Bengal brought in changes to the region the naive indigenous could ever imagine. Organization and reorganization of areas, sometimes into Assam and then to Bengal and back, also contributed largely to the population distribution and movement. This had been a major factor in census data and subsequent policy decisions. In April 1836, Bengali was declared the language of the courts in Assam, replacing Persian. Bengali was also used as the medium of instructions in the educational institutions of Assam. Within decades, Assamese began to lose its identity. The imposition of Bengali as the language of the court and educational institutions resulted in the slow progress of education. Bengalis were brought in and employed in the schools of Assam. There were almost no schools teaching Assamese even as a subject, let alone being the medium of instruction. Assamese literature thus suffered. Initially, the imposition did not meet with any kind of protest. Rather, the Assamese elite used the language in their writings and even in conversation, and the language policy of the government went unquestioned for almost a decade. The Bengali Amolas brought their own culture, language and traditions, and it started to affect the native culture, economy and eventually political status of the natives. There is a Amolapatti in almost every major town or city in Assam, the reminiscent of that era. American missionaries were one of the first to take up the cause of the Assamese language. With the idea of spreading Christianity, they started publishing text in Assamese and initiated the publication of the first Assamese newspaper, Arunodoy, in 1846. This inspired a younger generation of Assamese to pursue the cause. Anandaram Thekial Fukon's Ohomia Lorar Mitra, Gunabhiram Borua's article in Ahom Bondhu were some of the first published texts by the natives. Hemchandra Borua's contribution to the development and modernization of the language was immense. He was instrumental in the publication of grammar texts Ohomia Byakaron, Ohomia Lorar Byakaron and dictionaries Porhaholia Obhidhan and Hemkuch. When Hemkuch was first published, it contained about 22,346 words. It still remained the most referred to dictionary of the Assamese language. In 1872, George Campbell, the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, made Assamese the language of education and administration for its native speakers. Eventually, in 1874, the government revised its earlier language policy and the commissioner categorically stated that in the primary schools, rather than Bengali, Assamese should be the sole medium for instruction. However, the commissioner had no objection to the use of Bengali textbooks if the students understood that language, and Bengali continued to be the medium of instruction in middle grades till the end of the 19th century. Another important event was Junaki. The efforts of the members of Ohomia Bhasha Unnoti Hadhini Sabha, a group of students then studying in Calcutta, resulted in the Junaki, the moonlight in the midst of darkness. The debates and struggles of the natives on the issues of language during the 19th century resulted in increased awareness about the distinctive linguistic cultural identity of Assam. These were the stepping stones into a long history of struggles that was about to come. That's all for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. We look forward to your suggestions and criticisms. Write to us at storiesassam@gmail.com. This episode is available in all major podcast platforms including Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast and also YouTube. to like, share and subscribe, and connect to us on Twitter at Assam.Stories and Instagram at stories.assam. Tune in every Friday for new episodes. Have a great week.